All right, everyone, and this is All Star Productions here. We're finally back with some more of the WMMA6 Developers Journal coverage. And I ended up getting a new headset because my old one was kind of shitty, or at least it was getting kind of shitty. So yeah, there is that. And we're finally back with some more coverage on the WMMA6 Developers Journal. I told you guys I wouldn't be able to cover Thursday and Friday's entries right away, but we are here now, and we are officially back, and we're going to get right into it pretty much. So if you guys enjoy the content, consider subscribing, or consider hitting that like button if you enjoy the videos that I've been doing. If you would like to talk some more into the game, or just really in general. Sorry, I was drinking Monster Ultra Sunrise, but yeah, we're going to get into day 4 and day 5 together for this one. And honestly, coming back to these after a short break feels like opening a double feature. Because Adam hasn't slowed down. He kept dropping the new features and the new upgrades, deeper systems, and the new entries that are continuing to shape WMMA6 into the most modern, most polished version for the series that we've ever seen. We've already covered day 1, giving us the real world calendar and some speed boosts with an FAQ as well. Day 2 delivered ranking overhauls, manual control, mass negotiations, expanded awards and rule templates. Day 3 hit us with some new defensive skills and upgraded South America, enhanced alumni history, pound for pound rankings, and contextual opponent records. But now we're going to step into day 4 and day 5, the final 2 entries for week 1, the point where the journal starts to settle into its rhythm and the bigger picture of WMMA6 starts to become even more clear. These 2 days continue the trend of redefining realism, expanding world building, and smoothing out long-standing pain points from the previous games. They're not just flashy gimmicks. They're the kind of foundational improvements that'll make the entire game feel deeper, smarter, and more alive. So let's get into it, shall we? All right, so if you guys don't know already, this is how we will be looking at this. Well, I'll tell you what exactly he wrote down, and then I will give you guys my explanation on it. So we'll start things off with number 13, which just says one more fight. Major companies can now talk big name fighters out of retirement for a one-off lucrative fight. If they accept, they automatically get added to the roster and will then immediately retire after their next fight. The process is much easier than talking people completely out of retirement. For example, when the intention is that they'll potentially be fighting multiple times, which also better reflects the reality of it. So the short answer is that it means the game will treat one-off comeback fights much easier to arrange than full coming out of retirements. And once the fighter takes that single fight, they'll automatically retire again immediately afterward. It's a mechanic designed to mirror how real combat sports promotions occasionally lure big names back for that one super fight or that one last payday without actually restarting any careers. You guys have seen it happen before. So this is kind of nice, actually. So, yeah, there we go. Oh. And, let's see. Now we're going to get into 14, which is corporate relationships. And Adam Ryland wrote, the relationships between companies has been expanded to allow for positive and hostile relationships that can change over time based on multiple factors. This replaces the very one-dimensional system that existed previously. So in WMMA5 and the earlier games, company relationships were extremely simple. A promotion either had a working agreement or didn't, or was in an outright war, but even then, most of the time, the promotions were just kind of there. WMMA6 is replacing that with a multi-layered, evolving relationship system. Companies can now have positive or hostile relationships. These aren't binary. They exist on an actual spectrum, whether it's friendly, cooperative, neutral, competitive, hostile, or outright enemies. They can move up or down that spectrum over time. Relationships will change dynamically based on multiple factors. This is the big upgrade. WMMA6 will track many variables that influence how promotions feel about each other. Talent poaching, contract disputes, co-promotions, the media battles, public statements, title recognition, regional expansion, TV deals, fighter sharing, event scheduling conflicts, historical rivalry. These factors push relationships toward friendliness or hostility, and it replaces the one-dimensional system. Previously, relationships were pretty static and simplistic. WMMA6 plans to make them more alive, reactive, and strategic. So the new system will be able to affect the negotiations and contracts. A hostile promotion is less likely to allow talent sharing or co-promotions. Fighter movement. Friendly promotions may avoid poaching each other's fighters. Hostile ones may aggressively target each other's stars. Co-promoted events. It seems that we can start to do more like cross-promotional type things going on now too, with friendly companies being able to work together more easily. And obviously the hostile ones will never be able to really cooperate, which would be pretty cool if we get to be able to do something like that. And promotions will be act more realistically by forming alliances, escalating rivalries, reacting to actions, punishing people for aggressiveness and rewarding others for cooperation, which will make the world feel more alive and strategic on that sense as well. Think of it like Bellator versus UFC, or right now UFC versus MVP and PFL's merger, or one championship versus a lot of different combat sports in general, or regional promotions cooperating or competing against each other, co-promoted events, friendly cross promotions. And now it's time to go into number 15, corporate attacks. Taken from TEW, companies can now make corporate attacks against each other to try and actively hurt the image of the rival. Of course, there is always a chance that a dirty trick may backfire, though. Okay, I'm done. But basically what that means here is that this is directly borrowed from the whole Extreme Wrestling. For those who may not know, for those who do know what he's talking about there with the TEW stuff, then it's pretty straightforward, but I'll explain it for those who don't. Companies can now actively try to damage rival promotions through deliberate attacks, whether that's during a press, somebody throws in a fake journalist to spread hate toward the other promotion, or maybe there are strategic dirty tricks that hurt another company's image, the fan perception. I'd imagine it'd probably do something to the credibility and stability. I'm sure there'd also be these attacks that can backfire, what would end up hurting your company instead. Which could probably, of course, deal some damage to both the credibility and stability. And I think it's nice that they're bringing this, honestly. And these attacks tie directly into what was number 14 as well, where hostile companies are more likely to attack each other, and friendly companies will almost never do so. So I'm pretty excited to see that. And now we're heading into number 16, which is enhanced imports. The two importers, the editor and in-game, have been upgraded to bring them in line with the TEW series. This means they're easier to use and more powerful than before, and therefore makes life a lot easier for database modders in particular. So WMMA6 has upgraded both the import systems to match the TEW ones for quality of life improvement. And we'll be able to have imports for far more data types, complex data, and potentially large volumes of data at once, and maybe not as slow for the larger databases, which also means database makers can build huge, intricate mods without fighting the tools necessarily. The TEW's import system is widely praised for being robust, flexible, stable, and most importantly, mod-friendly for those that are making those big-ass databases. And WMMA6 will be able to inherit some of those strengths. And why this matters for those modders, there's faster mod creation. You'll be able to import hundreds or thousands of different things of data and settings without having to manually recreate everything. And there will be fewer errors, which the improved importer then will catch mistakes before the database breaks more often than not. There will be more complex databases with larger universes, more historical context, more crossover, more real world mods and fantasy worlds and multi-region ecosystems and all of that with far less friction. And it'll be easier to update things. And as you can just import the changes instead of rebuilding entire sections, most likely. So ultimately, it helps everyone. But now we're going to go straight into number 17, which is the searchable handbook. What he wrote here is that the game's handbook has been upgraded to match Total Extreme Wrestling's, both in terms of the amount of content that is covered and also that it is now fully searchable. So WMMA6 upgrades the in-game handbook to match the much more advanced system with a major usability improvement, especially for the new players or anybody who wants to quickly look up mechanics. And with that, with us having much more content, the handbook will be able to cover more of that content as well, which will be a closer reference manual than a simple help file too, which is great. And with them saying that it's fully searchable, pretty much any word that pops up in the game will then say, hey, here is this many results that contain this word. It sounds like, so you won't have to scroll through the database or have to worry about, is this actually what I'm looking for? Or is this something completely different? So the TEW style structure, for those who don't know, is widely praised for being comprehensive, well organized, easy to search and navigate, and extremely helpful for both new and advanced players. With WMMA6, hopefully to inherit that same philosophy. That's the hope, anyways. So now we'll go into 18, which is the organic biography upgrade. And this is what Adam Ryland said. Organic biographies are now created on the fly. This removes the load times that used to be necessary to generate them, and therefore means they're a much more attractive prospect to use liberally. Additionally, the organic bios have been further upgraded in terms of their content. They are now deeper, including referencing more different types of attributes and also the fighter's style. What this means is that the auto-generated bios the game will create for any fighters have been significantly improved. It affects how they're generated, how fast they appear, and how detailed they are. In the previous games, organic bios were created in batches that caused noticeable load times. It was relatively shallow in content at certain moments, because it'd be like, Fighter A is a well-known boxer with 0 wins and 1 loss and 1 no contest. They are typically a middleweight fighter. And it was just kind of limited in general. WMMA6 will be able to fix all that, supposedly. Bios are now generated on the fly, so there won't be any load screens. The loading will be faster. And it'll be created instantly when needed. And there'll be faster navigation as you can click through the fighters rapidly without waiting for bios to load. And it'll encourage using the organic bios more often. Because they're instant, players can rely on them freely without having to worry about any slowdown, which is a major usability upgrade. And as we were talking about too, the bios are deeper and more detailed. WMMA6 is supposed to have more attributes referenced, including the physical ones, the mental ones, the toughness, athleticism, and potentially the new defensive ones as well. Fighter's style is more included, is more detailed. It'll, instead of necessarily just saying they're a boxer, it'd be like they're more known for being a boxer, but can also wrestle or something like that, probably. But they're also being more variety. As for number 19, we've got assigning champions. By request is what he wrote. By request, the user can now assign vacant titles directly to a fighter if they want. Previously, this required a title fight to take place to crown a champion, which is a massive quality of life upgrade for some content creators. Like me, who just want to get sometimes just wants to get straight into it. It has to wait a bit to book the title fight. But now you don't have to worry about it. You could just bring in Aaron McKenzie to become a new champion without ever really do anything. Or if you're doing a UFC save and somebody's got a title that's vacant, you could give that championship to somebody else. So it's very helpful. And there's not really I don't think there's really a whole lot to say there. So I'm just going to move on to number 20, ranking display choice. As many people requested it, you can now choose via the user preference screen whether rankings screens are shown in a horizontal layout like WMMA5 or whether they're vertically like WMMA4. So the horizontal layout is wide rows, lots of info spread across the screen. The vertical layout is compact, stacked info, easier to read for some players too, though. But the fact that we'll be able to choose is great. Because as I've talked in previous videos, the more control a player has, the more fun they're going to have. And ultimately, in a sandbox like WMMA 5, 4, and 6, and the TEW games, the more control players can have, the more players you'll be able to bring in general too. This doesn't necessarily change the gameplay logic, only how it's presented, but it does improve accessibility, comfort, customization, and usability on different screen sizes too. It's a thoughtful improvement that makes the user interface a little bit more flexible, in my opinion. So that was day 4. Now we're going to go straight into day 5. And what's 9 plus 10? 21? You stupid. Trades. And this is what he wrote. By popular request, companies now have the ability to propose talent trades with each other. If a proposal is accepted, then this works as a straight contract swap. This adds some extra realism and one of the features that came up in the suggestions forum the most since WMMA6 came out. So the fact that this is finally happening is kind of nice. What I'm hearing out of that is kind of how it sounds like it's similar to how the Total Extreme Wrestling saves are at times. You could have a straight contract swap, or you could do fighter for fighter, something with not much money involved, or a no complicated negotiation tree. And this mirrors how it works, but adapts it to MMA's contract-based world. So we'd get some strategy, we'd get more realism, and it makes the computer promotions more interesting too. Seeing, for example, the UFC and if the UFC or One Championship start doing a trade with each other. For example, maybe One Championship wants to bring Rod Tang over to the UFC, and the UFC trades over Justin Gaethje. Now they can. And it ties directly into the corporate stuff too, and roster management as a whole. But now we're going into 22 with advanced matchmaking. Fighters who are blocked from taking fights because they're suspended, injured, etc., can now still be used for matchmaking, providing that they'd be back in time to train for the fight. This makes forward planning a lot easier and a lot more user-friendly than in previous iterations where you'd have to wait for them to return before you could book them. Note that this specifically applies to situations like injuries where the fighter is blocked from competing. It is not applied to situations where they're choosing to not take fights, such as when they've decided to take some time off to recuperate or go on hiatus. So if a fighter is injured but will recover before the training window begins, you can book them. Or if a fighter is suspended but the suspension ends early enough, you could book them. Or if a fighter is medically restricted but will be cleared soon, you can book them. This matters because we can have forward planning, more event scheduling, more management within weight classes, and just long-term strategy for matchmaking in general. You no longer really have to wait for fighters to return before planning their next bout, which then you can build fight cards more potentially as well, or at least plan them a little bit better too. Although the clarification here is what he wrote, it only applies to fighters who are physically blocked from competing. It does not apply to fighters who are leaving because of personal choice, such as taking time off, going on hiatus, choosing to recuperate, or declining fights for personal reasons. If they're unavailable due to their own decision, you cannot book them still until they return. So now we'll go into number 23, which is ranking comparisons. To aid database makers, the fighter rankings editor now includes an inbuilt comparison tool to make the process of updating or balancing databases much quicker and more user-friendly. So this is a maker quality of life upgrade, letting us compare fighters side by side within the editor, helping balance divisions more accurately, and updating rankings far more fast. Reduces guesswork when adjusting fighter positions, and maintains consistency across weight classes and promotions. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes for you. But now for number 24, we've got drug failure tracking, which Adam Ryland wrote to help add to the simulation aspect of the game. A new stat has been added that keeps track of how many times a fighter has failed a drug test during their career. As this figure increases, a variety of new effects will come into play, ultimately potentially getting to a point where they'll no longer be able to be licensed to fight in regulated regions at all. So this will affect licensing requirements, the ability to fight in regulated regions, damage reputation, strain relationships with promotions, increased scrutiny from commissions, and potential career derailment. And then for number 25, we've got repeat offenders, with regions and companies now being specifically set to deal more harshly with repeat offenders when it comes to failing drug tests, with suspicion links rising with each successive failure, to try and help stamp out serial cheating, which adds an extra touch of realism to the game. So regions and promotions will have harsher penalties on fighters who repeatedly fail drug tests too. So it's more than just a 25% fine or a 20% fine or however much they're using. But with these upgrades, WMMA6 continues to push the series forward, in depth, realism, and usability. Each new feature so far, whether aimed at database creators or long-term story world or payday for every day, every night. I'm just kidding. It reflects years of community feedback and careful refinement. Together, they create a more dynamic, flexible, immersive management experience than ever before. It becomes clear whether WMMA6 isn't just an iteration, it's a comprehensive evolution. But I'm All Star Productions, and this was day 4, and day 5 of WMMA6. We were talking about that partially as well. But make sure you hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, everyone.